Dum, da-dum, dum, dum, dum. Hi! Thanks so much for coming over. I bet you know what day it is. It's my birthday, the 8th of the month. My birthday is on the 8th of every month, but this is an extra special 8th of the month because it's April 8th, which means that it's Cora's birthday. Happy birthday, Cora. I love you. And it also means that 4 days ago was Sanna's birthday. And Sanna has a pair of socks who are orchestra conductors. Anyway, Sanna's coming over later so we can talk about religion, but I'd better start getting ready because I have a lot of cake to cut before she gets here.
Hello?
Sanna, come in! Hello.
Hello.
Happy late birthday.
Oh my god, thank you.
Come on in, come on in. I'll get the books out so that we can color. You know, it's funny, I thought of you last night because my mom was telling me about our praying practice when we were kids, which is something that we haven't talked about in like forever. And I didn't remember the prayer itself until she said it again with the intonation that we used when we were kids, which was really interesting to me to like notice that the intonation itself was what was like memorable. Yeah. So she was like, merci pour tout l'amour dans notre famille. And then I like remembered it. Yeah. I'm curious if like you have anything like that that's like, do you feel like there's something to prayer and like rhythm or like intonation as it relates to like your memory?
I think for sure. Okay, immediately when you said that, I thought of this like movement that I've seen my mom do and that I do, like when she reads the Quran. And it's like this, and like, I don't know. There's rhythm that like just comes out.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a deep part of prayer for sure.
Have you ever seen the poet Kaba Akbar read?
Yes.
It's very like he moves.
He moves.
Yeah. Or it's like moving through him or something. Yeah. Oh wow.
Or even there was recently a poet, Layla Shati, and Layla Shati, the way that she reads, Doyali Islam also reads like this. It's like a, like ba-bum, 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 and it's like, Doyali once told me that she loves to read her poems as she walks, like she memorizes them and then she reads them.
There you go.
As she's walking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool, you know your breath. You know how to breathe. That's a very good skill.
That's really cool. Wow. Yeah. I'm also, the poet T.C. Tolbert grew up very religious, and when they read, it reminds me of like my time in the Catholic Church. Yeah. So yeah, it's funny how that kind of comes back. When they read, it's very like sermon-like. But yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to tell you that as soon as you came over, I was like, she needs to know.
I do. I love the way that memories can just like come back, just with like tiny things, especially with like a sound or a smell. I feel like it just jumps out and I'm like, oh, hello.
Yeah.
Hello again.
Yeah, I know. I've been feeling so like frustrated about that though, because I feel like my memories are like so fragile that like as soon as I remember them once, then that's it. Like you can only remember it like purely as the memory ones, and then after that it's kind of this like exponential furthering where like you're remembering it and then remembering. But speaking of memories, if I say the word apricot to you,
Yes.
do you have a memory from when you were a kid that
I sure do.
you could tell me about?
My mom, whenever we have guests over, she has a plate of dry fruit. And personally, my favorite thing to do when a guest is coming over is to eat whatever they are meant to be eating.
Yes!
I would like to eat it.
Yeah.
I still do this and it bothers her so much. But I'm like, excuse me, these are called delicious snacks. I am called hungry. So,
Hello, hungry.
hello, hungry. Nice to meet you. I would always try to steal the dried apricots because they just look so plump. And they taste so good. But it's honestly like, I don't even think they were that good. Like, they were good, but I think I remember them as really good because I wanted them and because they were not for me.
You're not supposed to.
Yeah. You're supposed to have like one, not like eat all of them in front of your guests who you haven't offered them to, you know?
Totally.
But
yeah.
So whenever I think of dried apricots, I think of that tray of dry fruit, and I think of the dried apricots there. And I think, oh,
those are for me.
Those are for me. And usually whoever was coming over, like, understood. And let me have them.
For sure.
But now I also love to share them.
There you go.
Yeah, because they're such a delicious snack.
They are. They're so yummy.
Yeah, I would love to share them with my friends.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason why I invited you over is to talk about how you play in and with religion. So I'm curious to know how you played with or in religion as a child.
I think that I played with religion by like pushing on it almost. I think religion played a really like almost not laid back, but like non-issue in our lives. And then like I would be like, oh, but why do we do this? And why don't we do it like this?
Right.
And, ooh, there's a church that I went to preschool. Why don't we pray like this? Or why don't we do like this? And like, my parents were very kind and like very encouraging of my curiosities. So they were like, you know, like, oh, why don't you try? Why don't you go with that friend? Or like, go try doing that. Or doing that stuff. But how did I play with religion?
I mean, that sounds like play. That sounds like a way of kind of... Because play can be kind of like something that one does within a structure too, right? So it's kind of, it seemed like you were just asking about the rules of the game that you were, or I shouldn't call religion a game, but like whatever these okay, sure,
Personally, it's a wonderful game. It's like it's so many things, and one of those things is definitely a game. Yeah. Also, I think animals. I think I played with religion by playing in nature. Like we would go to there's like Arundel Park in Mississauga. My mom would take me and my cousin there every weekend, and we would try to fish. Oh, this was not great for the environment, but we would try to like fish for tadpoles, and then we would catch tadpoles and then release them.
Okay.
And then catch tadpoles and then release them.
Is that bad because they die?
I think it's not very good for them.
Yeah.
You definitely should not take them out of their river, their home.
Yeah.
I did do that a few times. I just wanted to have a frog.
We're all learning.
I just wanted to have a frog friend. I just wanted the frog to be my friend. Unfortunately, and not unfortunately, that is what I think religious play looked like.
Yeah, so you felt the specialness of something via plants and animals. That's cool. Okay, I'm curious about Can you tell me, like, well, or if you feel like you felt it, like, what does grace feel like for you?
Grace?
Yeah, like, or the divine or whatever. Like,
I'm like, who?
maybe grace is like a Christian word. I don't know. Is that
Grace is interesting because I'm like, I think grace is pretty centrally Christian, but also I like thinking about what grace would translate over to.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just cross my legs.
Come on over.
Ooh. When have I felt the divine or grace? I think it's little things again. Like I'm not. Sometimes I feel grace when I do sit and I pray. Like sometimes then I can access that, but it's like oftentimes when I'm really tired, then I pray best.
Yeah.
And then I can feel like let's say like God's presence or a feeling of like there's something around me that doesn't feel like me. And that not me is what I register as grace. Yeah. There are moments where I feel like when I'm doing something, I'm not doing it alone.
Yeah. That's interesting. Is there like any kind of valence to that presence? Like, does it feel forgiving, or is it just like a presence, period?
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't. Sometimes it can feel forgiving. Usually, it does. It if I'm really thinking about it, it doesn't. It doesn't tend to feel the way I would want it to feel. It feels like half a note away from that.
Yeah.
So if I feel like if I'm like praying and let's say I'm like asking to feel help, I'll feel not comfort, but less confusion.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, or not aloneness. Yeah, that makes sense to me because it's like, yeah, it's not like the presence will like actually fix everything, but it's just knowing that there's something, almost like, because a lot of the like difficult things in life are things we can't control, but then maybe it's nice to know that there are good things that we can't control, or something.
Yeah, or that like maybe it's a good thing. Maybe the thing that we need will be like half a step away from what we thought it would be.
Totally.
I don't know.
Yeah. Do you feel like, or how do you play now in religion?
I think I play now in religion by doing stuff like that leans into uncertainty. So I like stuff like I like things that are like a little risky. Like I like tarot.
Okay.
I think tarot is very risky.
In what way is it risky?
I was so scared of it. Like I didn't touch the tarot deck that was gifted for me for like 3 months because I was terrified of it. It's very like it's an uncertain object, and it's like you're playing with something that is and isn't. Like I find those things to be very religious, things that are and aren't. Like tarot is true and isn't true, and you have to just deal with both.
Yeah.
Like you just have to deal with the fact that you pull a card and you're like, oh, look at this card. Yeah. And like divination has a particular connotation, I think, in Islam and in like the kind of Islam that my family practices,
Mm-hmm.
where my parents are like, oh, we don't know why our daughter does this now, but okay. But like, for example, my sister is like, why do you do this? Like, this is scary.
Tarot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think like, and I felt that way also, because it's like one of those things where it's like you're leaning into an uncertainty that could be potentially quite dangerous. Like,
Yeah.
you know, because
Yeah.
like there's a lot of ways that tarot, you can read something and then it can change how you live, and that's part of its power too.
Mm-hmm.
But like working
Mm-hmm.
and working within that uncertainty
Mm-hmm.
is how I think I play now. Like trying to make it fun, trying to make it healing or soothing.
Yeah.
Is how I think I play in religion now. So things like tarot, things like, what else? Just like silly little risky things that scare me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny about your parents and tarot, because my mom is also like very afraid of both tarot, but also like anything that's like mythical and like non-religious. But it's interesting because it's almost like a fear of like knowing how strong belief can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or knowing how culpable belief can be. Like how unstable and like I don't want to say volatile, but like dynamic.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
belief has the capacity to change the whole trajectory of your life in like tiny doses.
Totally.
Like that's what I think scares my sister about tarot. Like I could pull let's say the Tower, and I'll be looking at a decision that I would have made one way, and I might just lean into the other way.
Yeah.
I think it asks you to be very, very, very honest with yourself also, in a way that I don't think is very easy. Because then, I don't know, one thing I like to say about tarot is that you always end up thinking what you were always going to think.
Yeah.
You know? Like you're not, like there are no thoughts in your head that are not your thoughts.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My feeling, I'm kind of like a nascent tarot practitioner. And the way that I feel about it is that it's just like intuition exercise. Like you're taking your intuition to the tarot gym or something.
Oh yeah.
Because like all it does is like highlight something or alight something in you that you've already been thinking about. But I feel like my thoughts are so nebulous that it helps to solidify certain things into more like objects, I guess. Yeah. Which also writing helps me do too. Yeah.
There's a poem by Yinyi in The Year of Blue Water. The Year of Blue Water. That's the
all
whole
you
tweet.
need to say. Yeah.
That's it. But he says something like, something is like tarot. And he's referring to like this feeling of pouring yourself into something else in order to process it. I think that's what he's referring to. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you pour yourself into I want to know about your relationship to religion and your writing and your poetic practice. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. I think that when I read a poem, I am experiencing a grace. Like to use that term again, like I am experiencing a moment that is divine, no matter where it comes from, no matter who wrote it. I think poems are the best medium for me for understanding anything related to religion. I just haven't personally found another medium that gets as close. Or that not even gets as close, but like generates as much. And like, I just don't personally feel like I access that as quickly and as strangely.
Yeah. It's like a conduit for, I guess the word that my mom uses a lot is, and that I feel that poetry, I don't know if poetry is the thing that's doing it, but somewhere it's happening. I don't know who to point at. She uses this word transmutation a lot, and the way that like energy can be transferred, like badness into goodness or whatever, and that a lot of the time is how she understands her own agency over her life. Is there anything there for you?
I recently learned the word transduction.
Okay.
And I love it. I took this class in my last semester at U of T. I did a presentation about my friend Francis's poems, which were erasure poems made entirely out of the Bible. So they took the Bible and they cut it up and they took the words that they wanted. And it was like an act of reclaiming. Yeah. Because they were gesturing back to like their mother's biblical practice. I brought up questions of translation and how do we translate, and that's such a thing for poetry, right? But I think that then Professor Coleman was like, beyond translation, we can think about transduction, which is like when you turn something into something else, but you hold on to something from the start. And I was like, how's that different from translation? And then he said that with transduction, something new is made. And like the newness is the emphasis. Yeah. Whereas with translation, he thought that something of preservation was the emphasis. I don't know how much I still believe that. Yeah. But I liked the word transduction.
There's something there. Yeah, like transduction feels like an after poem kind of.
Yeah.
Like it's looking at the thing that it's being kind of grown out of, but it's not the thing.
It's not the thing. Yeah. And I think that's how I think about poems. Like they're transductions of whatever corners of life they're springing forward from. Right. Whatever like places that poet has been, or that poet is going to, or that poet thinks about. And they're transductions of like tiny, many things. Right. Yeah. And that's like, I don't know, that's religion too. Like religion is trying to do the same thing. So I'm like, why don't you guys meet? Yeah. And like hang out? Yeah. Because I think we would be good friends. Yeah. And they're good friends for me.
A religion and a poem walk into a bar.
What do they say? I don't know.
I don't know the punchline to that one.
Yeah, me neither. But it's a great start. We'll keep working on it. Workshop it.
This transduction thing I like because I feel like it takes seriously the notion that like everything is a metaphor, but like it's so much less literal than that because it's like let's say a metaphor is like still holding the hands of the two things that it's making the same or equating. Yeah. But like this is like, or it's like the equal sign versus like the tilde or whatever, where it's like approximate to or whatever. It's also commonly used in internet language to like
intonation. Intone.
Exactly. Yeah. I would love to know about. Do you have any objects that? Well, okay. First, I'm going to give you the option of telling me that this is a bogus question because I'm curious how you feel about religious metaphor. And then my second question is, do you have any objects that feel like prayers?
Is it the simile that you're asking if I object to?
Or like more generally, maybe not just this question, but just like, I don't know, because like poets love to call things holy. So
Oh.
if that's something that you're like, you know what?
I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I had a thought. It slipped away.
It's okay. Bye.
I think the first thing that popped in my head when you asked that was that objects are not like prayers, objects are prayers.
Okay.
And then the second thing that I thought was when you were asking about metaphors is that I think that I only object to poets being like, oh, this is holy or that is holy when I feel a sense of like insincerity.
Right.
Like the only thing that sometimes gets me is like the hierarchy making of religion where you want to hide from the institutionalizable structure of it. Like when, and I understand that this is also like a very necessary structure for some people to lean into, but like the whole like religious versus spiritual thing.
Totally.
I think for me personally, I get confused about it because I think that there is a displacing of power that feels to me like it doesn't. How do I put this? There's a displacing of power that feels to me like it doesn't actually displace anything at all.
Yeah.
But that's not, I don't really have the right to say that. It's just how I feel sometimes when I hear it. Sometimes when I hear it.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Okay. I would like to know how you would like to play.
I think a lot of my life revolves around, I feel like steps that are, and this is not, again, I don't know if I fully agree with myself on this, but
Everything's a hypothesis. It's
everything
okay.
is a hypothesis. But I feel like there are questions that come before play, which I am really worried are not getting as much care as they need. And I feel that particularly just because of the communities that I come from. Like, you know, being Muslim is great, but also God. It's not. I don't want to say it's not easy, but like it poses a certain risk in the time we live in today.
Yeah.
And I feel that risk very acutely.
Yeah.
Especially for certain members of my family, like my sister, who's like a hijabi in Texas. And I'm like, why do you live there? Why do you do that?
Yeah.
And like who has had, you know, acts of violence done upon her house or like or like other people in my family and also as, you know, being Kashmiri, like I want to establish conditions for play. And sometimes I feel like how I want to play is not the question for me. It's more like, how do I get to a place where I don't feel guilty when I play?
Right.
Which is it's just like honestly the fact for me. And like, I don't know. That's the closest I have, which is like, I also understand that play is it's not linear. You don't like have steps and then you can play. But it's like in the conditional spheres that we live in. I want to play. And I think there are ways that I want to play.
Yeah.
But right now I do them in conditions that don't really look like play. Like my play lately looks like pushing the limits of emotional labor with my family members.
Right.
Or like it looks like having those conversations that I feel like we've never had. Yeah. Because we've not really been allowed to ask them of each other, or like it's been uncomfortable to ask of each other. So I think that's my play. It's like looking at my cousin today and being like, okay, so like, what happened to you this year?
Yeah.
And being able to get through the work and the difficulty of the conversation that we were trying to have.
Yeah.
And then also being able to just hold space for each other after.
Yeah.
I don't
That's
know.
totally playful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Both of those thoughts make a lot of sense to me. Like, the first being kind of like, what conditions does one need in order to be able to play? And like, yeah, I think absolutely one needs to feel safe and not guilty and all of those things in order for it to be even possible. But also like that pushing with your family members, like that's, you could call that playful for sure. Absolutely.
I feel like I don't want these things that feel very heavy. Sometimes I want to turn those into play.
Yeah, and also it sounds like the transduction is coming back to you too. Yeah.
I think transduction is really fun.
Yeah.
I think it's really fun to write poems. Even when they're sad poems, I think there's an element of play still going on. Also, what's sadness? I don't know. What's grief?
Yeah.
That's been a big thing. It's like thinking about grief as something made of love.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about grief as like an act of love.
Yeah.
And then with love, they're not like play is somewhere. Play is hanging out with love all the time.
Totally.
They are best friends.
Yeah, I would love, like, I'm picturing grief and love are like maybe siblings. And then like play is love's like new puppy. But I'm curious what like grief's pet would be and like what we would call that if we're like calling it the opposite or the. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. So play is love's puppy.
Yeah.
Okay. And then who is grief's
pet? Like it could be a lizard.
It could be.
Yeah.
Ooh, this is a great question. Oh my god. I think grief's pet is a bird. A very small, but
does it live in a cage?
No.
Okay.
It's chilling.
Yeah.
Maybe like a long-tailed bird.
Okay.
Bird with long tail, small body.
Yeah.
Big wingspan. Not very colorful.
Yeah.
Maybe yellow. I love grief's bird.
And is it called play too? Or is it, I guess I'm curious, like, also what its name would be.
These are great questions. What do you think grief's companion?
I feel like grief's equivalent of play. I have to think of what this animal would be. I'm kind of reverse engineering it, but I feel like it would be more in memory and yeah, like I feel like love's play is more of an object and like grief's play is more of like a remembering or like a shadow. It's like play's shadow. So I guess grief's play is
love's
play's shadow. Like so the puppy's shadow. It's the shadow puppy.
Oh my god.
Maybe?
Oh my god. And then is grief love's shadow?
Oh no.
That's okay.
Maybe. But I like to think that it's like Peter Pan's shadow and it's like not attached.
Maybe. I like that.
But they can like become
shadows
attached.
Can be great. Shadows can be cooling.
Yeah.
Shadows can be tender. What about where's the light coming from? If love has a shadow, who's the light?
I feel like I know my answer. Do you have one? I think mine is just attention.
Attention?
Right?
Oh.
But maybe that's that might be too easy.
I don't think so at all. Wow. I did not think of that at all. Attention. Who is the light?
And then like you can't see because like when you put a light on something, it always has a shadow. So like
If you
love's shadow's always there. The grief is the graph. There's a graph too.
There's a graph too.
But yeah.
I like that a lot. I think I don't know what I think about the light. I think the light is just the light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just what allows it to exist the way that the sun allows all life.
My first thought was like God, and then I was like, are you sure about that? And then I was like, maybe you are. But then I don't know. I like attention a lot though. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
And then when you give, I don't know, I'm a big believer in that love. I had this conversation with my friend Francis where they were like, oh, when you love someone, like you can never unlove them. You always love them. I don't know if I believe that.
Yeah.
I think love is an act of attention.
Yeah.
So I think that, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think?
I mean, okay, I know you hate facts, but I do think that like defining terms is very important.
Okay.
And I think that a lot of my peers think that love is what psychologists call like passionate love, which is the beginning of a relationship.
Okay.
And then like, but the majority of like love over, when we're talking about romantic love, like after a certain point in time, passionate love, like kind of the opposite of skyrockets, like ground rockets, right? And then like it becomes like companionship, which like to me is like the highest form of love is
companionship.
Yeah, because I feel like to me right now, love is safety, but that can change. So yeah, so in that sense, if love is present, then like you can't. Yeah. But I think that like the love itself does change, and can.
I think this is so good.
But maybe that's not what Francis meant. I don't know.
I think Francis has so many thoughts about love, but but like I think that I love that you pointed towards like safety and how that feels like what your love is moving towards or gesturing towards. And I think that why I think love has the capacity to dissolve over time, or like the transience of love.
Yeah.
In some ways, I believe in it because I think a lot about indifference. Like I think that love for me that pulls most strongly at me is most comfortable with indifference. I don't know if that made sense, but like being comfortable. Like I'm thinking about my friend Terry and how he writes like these horse poems. They're great, and then oftentimes his poetry puts nature in a stance of indifference towards the world and each other, and it's like this very big indifference. Like it's like a very big indifference that the natural world holds, and that like you have to hold with it. Like the beach doesn't care. Like the beach, there's no there's not the capacity for caring as we understand it. So you have to sort of like kneel to that indifference.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I think about religion a lot too. Like thinking about indifference and infinity. And then like I feel like love, oftentimes human love, is trying to make transience permanent. No. Make transience palpable. Make transience palpable. And I'm like, you can do that, but
Yeah.
you have to come to terms with the, like, ultimate indifference of the world to your love.
Yeah, I think I have a metaphor.
Please.
Did you ever, when you were a kid, like, use Elmer's glue on a piece of paper and then like pour glitter over the paper?
Oh, yeah.
And then some of it would stick.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you like really all like any time like the light shines on you or the rain goes down your body or whatever, it's really just like glitter moving over you. Or like when love passes through you, it's still glitter, but we want to like Elmer's glue it to the paper, which is fine, and you can do that, but it's still glitter.
It's still glitter.
Yeah.
And it's still Elmer's glue in a paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast, Dana Smith and Franny Choi and Angel Nafis. Those people. Those are beautiful people. Mm-hmm. And then Angel said she had just finished like graduate school, and she was talking about this one professor, and then she was like, I don't know how... Oh my god, wait. I want to remember the exact thing that she said, because it was very good phrasing. She was like, I don't know what I can tell you that's human about love, but I can be like, oh, look, there's a river. And then the general shape of the comment, because I can't remember the exact phrasing, was something to do with how, like, she wasn't sure how much of love, all of love, was contained in what was human.
Mm. Yeah, I'm still so stuck on it. Like I'm absolutely, that hit me and I feel it, but I'm still stuck on this indifference thing. I'm curious if that's just because it's so big and unfathomable that it ends up. It's like we can't hear every tone. Their ears can't hear every tone that exists, so it registers as indifference because it's so enormous.
Yeah.
Like. Yeah. Because I feel like indifference, to my mind, like, implies sentience of some kind. Even though it's, like, doesn't care, it has the capacity to care. Like, that's the only thing that's sticky for me, is that I feel like the indifference makes it, and this is my human brain thinking about humans being indifferent, I suppose, but, like, yeah, for some reason the indifference, I'm thinking like, but then that makes me feel like, couldn't it love me and not be indifferent? But I don't think that's what you mean by indifference.
I think when I'm saying indifference, I mean the love.
Yeah.
Like, I'm circling each with each other.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that I wanted to say but doesn't make sense, but like, fuck sense. Whose sense? I don't know her. Is that love is indifference in some ways. And I feel like, to me, the kinds of love that have been the most durable are indifferent.
I think it just made a lot of sense to me.
It just, like, I don't know. Like, the way the sea loves me is indifferent to me. And then it's still there.
Yeah.
And we're still having love.
Okay.
And I still love her.
Yes.
But she's like, who is she?
Yes. Okay. This actually, yes. Yes, because I've actually, so I love my mom. Love you, Mom. Like, she's just truly the best. And I've always said that it's because her love is both presence, but also allowance. Which is, I think that's your indifference.
I think so.
Because the sea is there, presence, but also allowance. Like, the sea doesn't care that I said a thing that I'm ashamed of. She doesn't care about my shame.
She's like, who's shame?
Yeah. Like, what? I am the ocean.
Like, I'm busy.
That's such a petty thing.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like,
yeah.
I guess indifference in some ways is also unconditional.
Yeah.
Right.
The closest word I've found to the kind of love that I associate to nature, associate to religion, associate to transience is indifference, which is a term I'm also lifting out of how I feel about Terry's poetry. Like, particularly right now, I think it takes on a different shape in different people's poetry. So, like, I don't know. It's like one ping of, like, orb, big orb, many crevice, many hexagon.
Orb, shape, movement, love.
Ping.
Ping.
You know?
Yeah.
You know? But the ping, the thing that I run into is, I still haven't totally, like, I want to understand what Francis is saying, but the thing that I run into is that the ping is not going to be there forever.
Yeah.
And I want to feel more and more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Like, I don't think that I don't think that there are friends who I have loved who I just don't love anymore.
Yeah.
And I am growing more comfortable with making space for other kinds of love, for other kinds of people.
I have a new thought.
Hello.
It's coming down. Which is, so do you know how like philosophers are like talking about or like speculating about being immortal is like useless because the whole point of why life is a good is because it ends.
Okay.
That's just a thing that they say.
They say.
Yes.
Yes.
And whatever that, but using that to talk about love, I feel like it has to have stakes of some kind, right? And if it's not conditional, if it's indifferent, then what are the stakes? And maybe the stakes are that it can end. Right?
That it can't end?
That it can.
That it can end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe for Terry, it's maybe there are conditions to love, but it never ends. But for you, there are no conditions to love, but it must end because otherwise, it just is nothing. Like there's no constraints to it, so it just becomes this blob of nothingness.
I do think love can do that. I also think love can do more than that, which is what you said about registers and like we hear one tone. Yeah. This is my one tone. I think you hear another tone. Yeah. Fram hears another tone. Terry hears another tone.
Yeah, because I mean, it's already up for debate as to whether we like perceive things in the same way just innately, but something like love, we learn what love is by how we are loved, right?
Yeah.
So
that makes me think about love being memory, which going back to what you said earlier. Yeah. How love and desire sometimes are made of memories.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe it's more like love and desire, or love and grief, and I guess also desire if we want to throw her in there. They're all shadows.
They're all shadows.
Of like whatever is being thought of. And there are just multiple lights that create the different shadows. I love when things have two shadows. Yeah. Like at a certain time of day when you're like reading a book and your finger has a blue and an orange shadow. Do you know this?
I think I do.
That's like my favorite thing. It only happens every once in a while.
It's great. And also sometimes when you have like one shadow here and one shadow like almost like here. And it's like you see you see both of them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. Yeah. Oftentimes people get obsessed. This is me being a little salty. People get obsessed with light and light metaphors as representing God. And then they often delegate shadows to representing evil. Right. But Sufis often were obsessed with shadows because they were like, ooh, God's being a little spicy today. Yeah. And God's following me around. Yeah. You know? And like turning darkness and things that are dark or things that are sometimes not bright, that's dark, into holy imagery.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always wondered about that too, the kind of
dynamics.
Yeah.
Yeah, that get embedded onto color. Yeah. And then that have very real consequences. Yeah. You know? Yeah. In how we portray holiness. Goodness. Yeah. Yeah, or like who you should aspire to be like. Yeah. Hello, whiteness, my old friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming over. This was really special. Yeah, I really felt your presence here, so I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I loved to talk with you, and I loved thinking together, and like making those wonderful little creatures that we made. I loved them. I'm so proud of them.
I know, they're such good people.
I'm so proud of them.
Yeah.
They always do their best.
They do.
And that's really what matters. They do their best.
Can we hug?
Yeah! Beautiful.
Ding! One word I like a lot is blue. B-L-U-E. I like it because it reminds me of a balloon, all blown up. Ding!